Commander Lyra Bailey studied the void like someone staring down a stubborn riddle. On the holotable, the pan-galactic map looked like a living stained glass window, pulsing with routes, stellar densities, gravitational signatures. And in the middle of all those colors, the aggression of an absolute white, Chiron territory. A blot with no data, no traffic, no radio noise. A silence that felt intentional. Lyra slid her fingers through the air, enlarging centuries-old records. Ancient telescopes had once caught glimpses of the Chiron rising. Satellites, stations, short jumps. Then the tide receded. Signals faded, then stopped. As if the sea of history had erased every footprint from the sand. They didn't vanish, she murmured. They just learned to leave no trace. The Kel-13 probe was her act of sheer stubbornness. An elegant device, half sensor, half diplomat. It carried recorded greetings in 1,000 languages, musical fractals, sculptures of light, seeds of methane-breathing algae, biosignature scanners capable of detecting a psi from 80 light-years away, mathematical translators, friendship, protocols broadcasting across every band. When the Kel-13 crossed the border, the observation deck froze. Readings exploded. Suspended cities, orbital rings vast as continents, domestic heat signatures from billions of bodies. Lyra smiled, triumphant, and then the sensation. The probe was being examined, not captured. Not hacked, seen, as if invisible. Patient hands unscrewed each bolt with the exact key, counted every atom, smelled every intention. The Kel-13's logs described a touch that never harmed. A polite curiosity. After that, nothing. The greeting signals dissolved like vapor. Silence dripped. Lyra waited hours, days. No threat, no invitation. Only a door, gently closed. Her colleagues laughed. A myth, an obsession, a waste of resources. The council stamped the Chiron as inaccessible. But at night, when the screens went dark, Lyra saw in that white spot on the map something staring back at her. Not absence, reserve, not fear, discernment. And she learned the taste of a question without an answer, the same taste all great discoveries have, 1 second, before they happen. Summoning the council took courage. The oldest species hated admitting a void intimidated them. Lyra presented her data like blades, absurdly clean energy on an unimaginable scale, perfect thermal order, a complete absence of orbital debris. Any ordinary civilization leaves a halo of error. The Chiron left symmetry. They see us, Lyra said, and they chose not to speak. That's a decision, not a ruin. Authorization came laced with poison. 1 ship, 2 weeks, no provocation. If nothing happened, the myth would be shelved. The diplomatic ship Aurora Ascendant departed with a surgical crew. Darrell Vaughan, a linguist with a soft voice and eyes that lit up at the sight of patterns. He collected grammars like others collected constellations. Vec Torin, biomechanical engineer, half flesh, half machine, fully stubborn. He saw flaws the way others saw colors. Nemra Sol, navigator, gifted at charting what didn't exist yet. Some said she could hear gravity at the edges of Chiron space. Subtle phenomena began bending their routines. The ship self-diagnosed without being asked. Files resorted themselves by a relevance no one had set. The helm suggested course. Corrections Nimra hadn't thought of, yet they were flawless. This isn't intrusion, Vec said, the metal on his forehead tightening. The Aurora wants to cooperate. Signals without clear semantics brushed the cabin with feelings. Welcome, caution, curiosity. Darrell described them as messages and concepts, not words. At night, Lyra wrote in her log, "If silence is a language, these people speak it fluently. If courtesy is technology, they are centuries ahead." When the border lit up like a line of aurora, Lyra knew they weren't being guided by coordinates, but by consent. 3 ships appeared, sculpted from coagulated light. No engines, no exhaust ports, no antennas. They had intention. They moved like fish in invisible water. The lead vessel slid alongside the Aurora. A docking tunnel grew out of its hull as if it were born there, found the airlock, and clicked into place with the familiarity of an ancient embrace. "We request perm," Lyra began. The hatch opened on its own, and only then invited them, "Enter." 3 Chiron crossed over. Humanoid, yet every gesture seemed to respect gravities we didn't know. The leader's bronze skin shimmered with a silver light dancing in her eyes. "Welcome," she said in flawless galactic standard. "I am Althena Keller." "How?" Daryl stammered. "We've been listening to you long enough to love your accents," Althena replied, smiling. Then she recited, without consulting anything, each of their biographies. The medal. Lyra had refused. The poem Daryl never published. The repair Vec made at 12 that saved a colony. The impossible map Nimra once drew on a napkin. "Why never answer us?" Lyra asked, firm. "Because answers are commitments," Althena said, "and commitments require readiness." She raised a hand. The Aurora's walls displayed, for an instant, a city made of shadow and sunlight. "Come see, then we'll talk." Lyra looked to her crew, 4 nods. The kind of yes that travels through history. The tunnel vibrated at a frequency like whale song. The hulls became neighbors at a molecular level. Crossing over felt like replacing air with silence and discovering. You can breathe silence too. There was no planet. The station floated in nothingness, like a stubborn idea refusing to fall. An immense ring turned slowly, yet had no axis. Towers of malleable crystal rose and sank with tides that didn't exist. A vertical ocean flowed from bottom to top, fish compasses swimming in spirals that sketched theorems. "We rewrite the neighborhoods of physics," Althena said. "Reality is negotiable when you know the contract." Gardens cultivated forests. From incompatible worlds, ammonia trees embracing silicon moss, flowers that bloomed into sound. In one plaza, the shadows of passers-by didn't align. Each shadow belonged to a possible future, and they greeted each other when they crossed .N. The laboratory's devices existed across multiple dimensions. Vec reached in and pulled out 2 watches. One told the time, the other told the intention to spend it. Daryl quietly wept before a book of unspoken phrases. Opening it, he heard words he had never dared to say. Althena led them to the cultural center. In one display, Lara saw her childhood pendant. It spun as if recognizing her. "How?" "We watch to care," Althena replied. "Keeping something safe is our way of asking permission." Nimra looked out at windows showing no stars, only lines of possibility crossing the dark. "What roots are those?" "The ones the galaxy has not yet allowed itself to learn," Althena said, and once again the silence smelled like an invitation. Gathered in a room where gravity adjusted to the group's mood, Althena began without theatrics. "We tried speaking. A long time ago. Images appeared. Wars over ice-rich asteroids. Treaties that saved some while abandoning others. The sick who could have been cured but waited for bureaucracy. You manage problems," Althena said without contempt. "We prefer to end them. When we gave you limitless energy, it became clean weapons. When we gave you agricultural techniques, they became elite privileges. When we offered cures, manufactured diseases were born. You withdrew," Daryl said softly. "We stopped giving and started seeding, small hints, little ideas, hoping you would nurture them in the right way. Sometimes it worked. Many times it didn't. And now?" Lyra asked. "Now you came asking to see," Althena said. "That's often a sign of growth." Nimra, restless. "Those roots beyond the stars, are they defenses?" Althena looked beyond the window, where nothing shone. "They are refuges. And inspections." "Inspections of what?" Vec asked. "Of what isn't born in this reality," Althena said quietly. "Things that don't negotiate." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was sharp as a blade. The news shook the Union. The Chiron would offer post-scarcity technology to any world willing to abandon wars for resources and systems of exploitation. Infinite energy, universal cures, matter fabrication. In exchange, commitments both simple and deep, cooperation, transparency, built-in safeguards. Assemblies erupted. Weary worlds wept with relief. Proud states sneered. Conditioned utopia is just a leash. They could impose this on us, Lyra told the plenary. They're not. They're asking for consent. That's power with a moral break. Half voted yes, half no. No one stayed indifferent. Althena sent the transition guide. 0-point generators with redundancy limits. Matter fabricators with ethical tracking signatures. Portals that lock shut at commands impossible to pronounce in an angry voice. And if someone attacks those who accept, they asked. We will not allow it, Althena answered. No boast, no threat, just certainty, the kind that made long-range sensors itch. Nimra couldn't sleep. She reviewed the non-existent routes and saw recurring patterns, arcs skirting knots of reality, spirals avoiding regions that weren't on any map because they weren't maps. They were wounds. You're hiding. Something she told Lyra in a corridor where the walls mimicked rain. Lyra demanded answers. Althena took them to a room with no doors. The ceiling opened onto a sky that didn't belong to the station. Up there, geometric figures pulsed like fighter craft made of mathematics. There are conceptual predators, Althena said. Things that eat coherence. When a civilization makes too much noise, war, waste, lies, it smells delicious to them. You fight them? Darrow asked, stepping back. We divert them. Sometimes we sing. There are songs that convince, realities to stay whole. And if the song fails, Vec asked, then we use what you would call weapons. We call them patches. Lyra understood. The Chiron silence was also camouflage. Vec found the null hangar by accident or fate. Ships kept in shadows that weren't part of local space. Hulls scarred not by lasers or impacts, but by ideas that had bitten them. Touching one hull, Vec saw memories that weren't his. A corridor. Of the universe tearing open, crews singing equations, a child telling a sky that wanted to forget its name. Don't be afraid. Althena appeared, serious. You shouldn't be here. I want to understand the price of what you're offering, Vec said. The price is glorious vigilance, putting out fires before the spark, being blamed for tragedies that never happen, because no one sees what was avoided. And what have you lost? Althena looked at her own hand as if checking it was still there. Some of us learn to think in too many dimensions. Sometimes they come back longing for what they were. Sometimes they don't come back at all. Vec nodded, respectful. He called it by the name heroes never use. Invisible sacrifice. On the day of the decisive vote, 3 border systems vanished. Not ruins, nothing. The roots touching them bent like compass needles around a magnet. Sensors showed a black blot that didn't absorb light. It absorbed description. Speaking. Its name made it more real. Althena appeared in the plenary without crossing a door. Her presence carried peace. It's too soon, she admitted. We thought our silence would be enough to hide them from you. But now they know you know us. Can you stop it? Someone asked, voice dry. We can contain it. To stop it is a verb that requires a choir. The half who had said no hesitated. Powers used to thrones realized thrones were just silly furniture in a burning house. Some changed their vote out of wisdom, others fear. Lyra didn't care which. Sometimes the reason matters less than the right act. The Aurora was chosen to lead the first. Chiron Tech, Containment Mesh. The instructions read like technical poetry. Weave margins, tune frequencies of memory, tie stories so reality remembers itself. The map Lyra had once loved now bore beautiful scars. Threads of light anchoring systems, choirs of ships singing measured equations. The black blot slowed, didn't retreat, but stayed in place. Sometimes that's all you can achieve on the first day. Althena gathered Lyra, Darrow, Veek, and Nimra in a room that felt grown from the station's own heart. You want technology, she said, but what we give is vocation. You want machines. We give an oath. The ceiling opened. Far. Beyond the galaxy, an archipelago of realities floated like islands on the sea of possibility. On each island a flame. In each flame a different song. We're not the only ones mending universes, Althena said. We're recruiting choristers. Lyra smiled, exhausted but whole. We accept. At their baptism, the Aurora gained an extra name whispered in a tongue that couldn't fit in sound, and a shadow twin, a version of herself that would sail ahead, clearing the path a second before danger existed. Darrow received an impossible alphabet, each letter an emotion. Vec was given a tool that repaired regrets. Namra learned to navigate by the scent of a good future. And Lyra? Lyra received the duty to stay silent when the world demanded a scream, and to sing when silence was the only cure. They departed. The station shrank until it was only an idea. The black blot breathed. The mesh held Dot in her final log before the jump. Lyra wrote, "We didn't cross a door. We agreed to live on the threshold, Dot, and for an instant no one measured the entire galaxy. Seemed to give thanks, like someone waking from a nightmare and discovering they still have a voice."